Welcome to the Migraine Miracle Moment. I'm your host, Dr. Josh Turknett. I'm a neurologist, migraine specialist, migraine sufferer, and author of the book, The Migraine Miracle. In this podcast, you'll learn all about how to find your path to migraine freedom without pills. Let's get started. Howdy, Beast Slayers. In today's episode, I will again be answering a few questions from a recent Clinic Chat Live discussion. They are, can taking a daily baby aspirin cause rebound? Second one is a mostly carnivore diet okay on the Migraine Miracle program? And 3, will cashew milk break a fast? Again, these are all questions from a recent Clinic Chat Live session that we had for our Migraine Neverland members. We do these regularly over Zoom. And if you're interested in taking part in these live sessions, as well as being able to submit questions of your own, then you can learn more about becoming a member by going to mymigrainemiracle.com. Along with being able to attend all of these Clinic Chat Live sessions and watch the replay videos of prior ones, there's a whole host of other resources we've been creating over the past decade for helping you to put the Migraine Miracle program into action to slay the beast once and for all. Speaking of using Migraine Neverland to slay the beast once and for all, today's success comes from Linda, who says she's in phase 4 now, 38 days in a row, migraine free. So grateful for this program. Thank you, Linda, for sharing that. And also, I'm going to read a recent podcast review. We so appreciate our podcast listeners, especially anyone who takes the time to leave a review, and we will be reading out new ones here on the podcast. This latest one comes from the handle Ickablog Crane, who says, "It's impossible to put into words how thankful I am for this show." Well, thank you so much, Ickablog, for sharing that. Lastly, a few things that are mentioned in this episode. First is the Nutrients for Migraineurs workshop. So that is a workshop that I did a few months ago for Migraine Neverland members, and the replay of that is available in the Migraine Neverland virtual classroom. Again, the title is Nutrients for Migraine Protection, and it covers all of the essential nutrients that those with migraines should be particularly mindful of and where to find those in the diet. Other things mentioned that you'll find links to in the show notes are the Future Migraine Risk Score podcast. So that was a podcast where I talked about the concept of the Future Migraine Risk Score, which reflects the likelihood of any migraine abortive medication to raise the risk of a future migraine. So there'll be a link to that podcast episode as well as a download related to that. And then also, if you want to check out our latest promotion for podcast listeners, head to mymigrainemiracle.com/moment. You'll also find that link in the show notes. All right, and now, without further delay, here is the excerpt from our recent Clinic Chat Live. Is a mostly carnivore diet okay on the Migraine Miracle plan? So a while back, it's probably a few years ago, in a clinic chat, I mentioned, I don't quite know how this came up, but I said, if I had all the power in the world, what I would do to try to end migraines once and for all. And I said I'd put everyone who had chronic migraines into a hospital or a nutrition ward of some kind, and first, detox from the abortives, and then and at the same time have them fast for anywhere from 3 days to maybe 14 days, and then after that fast, start them on a carnivore diet. And by that I mean carnivore meaning meat only or animal foods only. And the advantage of that approach is that it removes any of the potentially problematic foods from the diet, specifically with respect to their impact on the gut. So as I've talked about, there's lots of evidence that there is a tight linkage between gut inflammation, increases in gut permeability, likely disruptions in the gut microbiota, and migraines.
And the primary culprits for that in the gut, is, at least with respect to diet, are going to be processed foods and various plant-derived compounds like lectins and so forth. And so this kind of protocol of removing the abortives, fasting, and then a return to the diet with just carnivore initially would kind of be a whole reset for the brain, the body, and the gut. So you would allow the brain to heal from the abortives, allow the gut to heal from any problematic compounds, first through just fasting, and then by introducing the safest foods possible from the standpoint of gut health. Interestingly, this was the protocol, that was essentially the protocol that was used early in the 20th century for children who were having intractable seizures. So they would, and this was to get them onto the ketogenic diet, but they'd first admit them to the hospital and have them fast, and then they would start a ketogenic diet, which again would be fairly low in plant foods. And our recommendations these days for phase 1 are definitely more limited in terms of what plant foods to include. But I certainly consider eliminating all of them as a viable option, especially for those who have any sort of digestive issues. We know now that people can clearly thrive on a carnivore diet for extended periods of time, with the caveat that I think it's important to ensure that you're eating nose to tail. And if you aren't, then to supplement accordingly. And if you want to know more about what supplements to consider in that regard, you can check out the clinic chat we did recently on the key nutrients for migraine protection. I'm also going to be doing a clinic chat that will be dedicated in part to talking about the carnivore diet and other types of kind of special diets. Is taking a daily baby aspirin as a preventative for non-migraine issues problematic for the plan? So the quick answer to that is no. The main concern there would obviously be the potential for it to contribute to rebound, since it is an analgesic. But at this point, there isn't really any reason to think that it does so, and that's because of the dose. So baby aspirin, we're talking about 81 milligrams, whereas your therapeutic dose is usually going to be between somewhere in the 325 to 500 milligrams range, and oftentimes you're taking 2. So the good news there is that the baby aspirin doesn't seem to be, the dosage there doesn't seem to be enough to impact pain pathways, which is part of why it's not especially effective as a pain reliever, unless you're a baby. But it is effective at reducing the risk of heart attacks and strokes, in particular in those who have had a previous one. And that's based on its ability to impact the stickiness of platelets, which are the factors in blood that start the clotting process. So good for preventing heart attacks and strokes, but not good with little impact on pain pathways. And so for those reasons, that's likely why I haven't had any people have issues with that as a cause of rebound. All right, next question. Does cashew cream in my coffee break my fast? So it's homemade. The ingredients are cashews, water, and vanilla. So we've talked about before with breaking fasts that there are a couple of different ways to think about it. And what we're, in this context, what we're mainly trying to do is prevent the secretion of insulin. That's kind of the metric for when the fast is broken. There are other kinds of fasts where you have more things that you're trying to sort of more physiological effects that you're trying to promote, and the things that might break that sort of fast would be different than if you're just talking about the things that will impact insulin secretion. So there, you're mainly thinking about carbohydrate content. Nut milks typically do have a little bit of carbohydrate. I would imagine cashew milk would be on the higher side since it's one of the sweetest. Actually, not even technically a nut, right? But it's in the legume family. You taste the sweetness in it. In that amount, it may not be a huge amount, but it could be enough to promote insulin secretion and so effectively break the fast. So the cream or heavy cream that's made from milk, which is what I use, is going to be just fat. It's not going to have an impact on insulin release, which is why that's what we generally recommend. If you really wanted to know, probably the best thing to do, you can't really measure insulin on your own. There aren't any commercially available things for home use, but you could test your blood sugar. So right before you had it, and then about 45 minutes after to see if there was an increase, which would give you a pretty good idea whether or not that's having an impact on insulin secretion.
All right, thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Miracle Moment. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to the podcast in your podcast player of choice. And if you know any fellow migraine sufferers, please feel free to share it with them as well. And now it's time to go out and slay the beast.